Hey gang, welcome back to Jade's Garage. This video is going to be a continuation of the radiator install on the 68 Mustang known as Jade. In the first video I went over basic fitment of the radiator and I designed a bracket to hold the bottom of the radiator. I had to design it twice because the first design just wasn't working. So if you're interested, go back and check out that other video. In this video I want to remove the water pump and any brackets that may be in the way and get the new water pump fitted. Now I'm using a water pump from a 1970 so that the water neck comes out on the driver's side, on the lower. And on the previous cars, they would have come out on the passenger side. So I'm trying to take advantage of a product that is already out there. So I'm going to use a 1970. So with that, I may have to modify, or I will have to modify the timing marks that are normally on the driver's side. I will find a way to put those on the passenger side so that if I ever decide to do timing or reset the timing, I have some marks for that. So let's get started. Now, as I said, I'm going to remove the water pump. I want to show you where the radiator sits right now, and I'm using the factory upper bracket. I had to modify that slightly, but it's going to work. And now I want to get everything else out of the way. So I have the original one obviously on my left, the new one on the right, and you can see the water necks are facing each other. The up tubes or heater core tubes are both kind of facing up. And I was looking at this thinking, is this really that much different? But it's not. If I take the gasket that came with the new one and I put it in place on this one, it's actually the same gasket. If I come over here and put that gasket in place, the only difference is it looks like it loses a hole up there between these two. So I don't see why this won't work. There's really no major difference. I mean, all of these holes are picked up. Maybe no. Yeah, it even has the cutouts at the bottom for those two bolts. So I'm going to clean things up and try to get this installed. Now I still have to work on what would be top dead center. So here I have, this is 0 and this is the indicator, and I should be able to rotate the crankshaft and set it up right there, and that should be 0, but I'll double check. I'll take pull the distributor cap off and make sure that it is on firing on number 1 so that this is in the right location. And then what I'll do over here is I don't know what I'm going to come up with exactly. There's no more mount holes, I don't think. Well, there's one right back there for the, I don't know what that one does, but there's a bolt back there. And I don't know if I'm gonna, come up with some sort of mark that I can use as an indicator on this side. It may just be a hash mark that I put right here on the cover and then on the balancer itself so that they're close to each other. Well, sometimes you forget that you have done things. So looking at this, there's my hash mark. Because this balancer, I'm trying to remember what exactly was going on, but I knew, or I was told, that these numbers that are on this will not work. I don't remember if my buddy that built the engine did this or what, but over here there are hash marks on this side of the balancer. I do have it up on number 1. I did check the compression and it's all the way up, so I'm confident with that. So again, what I'll have to do, I'll have to cover up these marks, I guess, so I don't get confused, but I shouldn't be confused because obviously if I'm way over here, there's no way that's going to line up, you know. So anyway, I'll come up with something on this side. Okay, so here's some progress. Now I talked about the hose coming out of the fuel pump. You can probably see it is down now. It's above the frame rails, which is fine. It loops underneath, comes back up through the bracket, or underneath the bracket for the AC unit. I decided to go underneath the water neck and then come up to the valve cover. I didn't like it before where it was coming through, like where the distributor was. It just kind of looked a little bulky. Here it's a little more hidden. So the water neck's on, fuel line's reconnected, and I wanted to work on the pointer for these indicators. Now, what I did is I just put some Sharpie on top of the existing marks, the correct marks that are there. And I needed to come up with a pointer. This is what I've come up with. Now I noticed that there was a bolt hole back here, and I could use the washer from that bolt, and I just fabricated a little piece of metal and I played with it until I got the shape that I wanted. So this is going to be my new indicator. I'm going to bolt that in and we'll take another look at it. So there it is in place. I think that's going to work just fine. Now the next thing I want to do is get the water pump mounted. So I'll get the gaskets in place and try to figure out if I have the right bolts, because I know that in taking this one off, the one I had on the car and the one that I'm putting on the car. So if you're looking at this, you know, the water outlets are here for the heater core, and there are differences in the thickness. So like this one and this one are pretty much the same. This one and this one are pretty much the same. This one is taller on the 68 style than this one, just slightly difference in height. Come around the perimeter, these two, or this one looks the same. This one doesn't exist anymore. It is actually gone. And then this one and this one are very similar. Of course, this one right here is much taller, you know. So I'm going to have to try to figure out what bolts I'm going to need. I have the bolts from this one. Maybe they'll all cross over to this one. So as I progress with test fitting different things, I can tell you the water pump will bolt up, but I am going to need some more bolts. As it turns out, the standoff, or the thickness, is the same on this side as it is on this side, and I'm lacking one bolt over here. Another thing, this alternator, this is the bracket that worked on the 68. This upper piece, the main carrier, let's say, it's easily manipulated. It had a little bit of a space between here and the water pump, and that's kind of a good thing, and I'll show you that as to why. But basically just tightening up the bolt, the bracket moved, and a bolt will go in up here as well, and it'll be all good. The thing I had to change or modify, the bracket. On the 68, when it mounted to this water pump, right here, I believe it was, it made it sit kind of forward, and the bolt that went into the alternator went in from the front. It won't work with this configuration because the bracket is got an angle to it. It joggles to the back. So I could have straightened it out, but it still was conflicting with the front of the housing. So what I did, if I can get the camera down there, I cut a notch right there, and there you can see I put the bolt in the back of the alternator instead of the front. Cut that notch to give me an angle. And now, if I can transition this back and forth, it clears. So what I will do is weld that solid once again, and it'll be fine. And I can use the same location for the bolt. Now they do sell other brackets for this. I know Vintage Air sells them, and there's a variety of companies that sell custom brackets, but this is pretty simple. Slight modification and I'll be good to go. So I can't put this in just yet. I need to get at least one more bolt, and I think that's going to be it. Oh, other thing. One small detail. And I don't think it's going to matter much. But if I put the pulley on the water pump, it is off just, I mean, not much. From being on plane with the crank pulley. So I don't see it causing any issues. If it was a bigger gap, that might make a difference, but it's really, really, really close. So I think it'll be fine. You know, that's what happens when you have to kind of re-envision things, but that's okay. This will help somebody else out and maybe get them moving forward on their project. At this point, I have the water pump installed. I did have to get a different length bolt, but otherwise I was able to use everything that was in the old water pump. The brackets are tight where they need to be. I have not obviously adjusted the alternator because I don't have the belts on yet, and I need to put the pulleys on the water pump itself. The problem I ran into, which is fairly minor, but I had to go get some more bolts. These are 5/16 by 24 by 3/4. The reason for that is the long bolts that go through the regular fan with the spacer obviously won't work. So you have to come up with some shorter bolts. That's what I'm going to use. Now, the other thing, I had this little elbow that connected the water neck to the water pump. And what I found is on this particular fitting, this is a bit bigger than what was there before. And I was really having a hard time getting that on there. So I went to Advanced Auto Parts and I found this Dayco B80411. This one will fit over that one fairly easily, and just a little bit loose on this one, but the clamp should take up any kind of gap on that. You know, it's hard to find a hose that has a larger diameter on one side, because again, this is, even pushing on it's going to take a little bit of effort to get it on, but that's the only conflict I've had so far. Now, there may be a specific hose is made for this setup, but I don't know. Now what I need to do is trim this down to make it fit where I want. So I'll get that hose connected. I'll get the other hose connected for, down here for the heater core. I'll get the pulley on, and I may just go ahead and get the fan belts in place as well. If it's not one thing, it's another. Now, granted, I'm doing something out of the ordinary by converting over to this 70 style water pump. The setup that I had with the 68 pump that I had on it, or 68 style, actually had a shorter shaft on the water pump. So now, using the pulley system that I have, I don't know if you can see it or not, but the pulley sits more forward. I've already shimmed the alternator. I added a couple of washers to the bushing that I already made, and I shimmed it out, and it's fine. However, I don't know if you can see it or not, the deflection of the AC and also the power steering, which share the same bracket from Vintage Air. So I'm going to try to do this and show you how much of a difference this is. So for lack of a better straight edge, I did check this paint stick. It is square, it is straight. If I go on the pulley, on the face of the pulley, you can see this one is almost in the center of this V-groove. Almost in the center. Now, if I take the distance or the thickness of the pulley flange, which is approximately 1/8 of an inch on that water pump pulley, and I come up here and I measure to the belt, I'm almost about a little, just a tick over 3/8 of an inch. I don't know if you can see that very well, but if I kind of compensate that 1/8 of an inch, I'm somewhere around, I'm going to say somewhere around 1/4 of an inch of offset. Now, is this a big number? It can be. So if you remember, when I did this installation of the AC bracket setup years ago, when I was putting the engine in the car, I had to customize everything to make the power steering pump fit. So what I plan to do is shim this out. And I'll do that by remaking these bushings that I have already made. I used some pipe and I made some bushings to hold this bracket system. So in effect, I need to lengthen those about 1/4 inch. And what that will do is move the AC compressor out and also bring the power steering pump out and align this much better on these pulleys. I can't go inboard, and pick up this pulley because my power steering pump is running off of this other pulley, off the rear pulley on the pump, on the water pump. So that's what I see myself doing. Otherwise, I'd have to buy another pulley for the pump. And I was looking at those things range from $50, $60, over $100, and I don't know specifically what depth I would need. So to me, the easier fix is to make new spacers for this bracket system. So I'm going to remake those and adjust this, and hopefully that takes care of it. I've adjusted this. I thought I was going to make new spacers for bushings, and I decided not to because I would have to take everything completely apart. This lower tube here, let's say inboard on the engine that supports this bracket, actually goes all the way through the bracket. It's not two pieces. It's not two pieces, it's one piece, and it's got a hole that it fits inside of that supports this bracket. So it would have gotten a lot more complicated had I tried to take all this back apart. So what I did is I found 2 thick washers that made up for the distance, or most of the distance. And I was able to get those behind those spacers that I have. So to show you, if I take this stick again, now you can see there's hardly any gap. It's still just maybe a 1/16 off, something like that. But that's a lot better than what it was. And now everything feels much closer to where it should be, So I'm pretty happy with that. I also shortened up this lower heater core hose. It felt like it was a little bit too long, and it kind of came out towards the battery more, so I just shortened it. It still has a nice flow to it, and I'm not going to worry about that. And I think that takes care of everything on the engine side. So now what I want to do is get that bracket installed down in the bottom and set the radiator in and see how hard it's going to be to hook up the tranny lines. I do have to transfer the fittings from the old radiator to the new one so that the lines will connect properly. Hopefully that's not a big deal. They should unscrew out of the old radiator just fine, and we'll see how that goes. I think this will be the end of part 2 in this video series. It took a little effort to get these brackets where I wanted them, to make sure the pulleys lined up. I had to go buy some hardware for the water pump pulley. I had to modify the bracket for the alternator. I went and got a different hose for the connection between the water neck and the water pump. I shortened up this hose that goes to the heater core, and I think that's going to be it at this point. I am waiting on the lower radiator hose to show up. I don't want to put the radiator in place until I have that in, and I know it's going to clear the fan belt and everything is going to be good in that case. If I put the radiator in now, it could just be in my way if I have problems. But I will, in the next segment, I will get the lower bracket in place, install the radiator, hook up the hoses, and work on connecting the relay. And the temperature sensor, of course, will go right there in the water neck, and hopefully all that goes smooth. Now I know this may be a little more complicated than what it should have been or could have been, but when I make these videos, I'm trying to share information so that if somebody else wants to consider doing this kind of project on their car, they know what they could be in for. But again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button, like and share, try to help this channel grow even more. But that'll be it. And with that, until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.